You ever look at your budget and just wonder how existing got so expensive? If you felt that squeeze, that feeling that just getting by is getting harder and harder, well, you're not alone. And what feels like a personal problem is actually part of something a whole lot bigger. Let's break down what's really going on.
And this right here, this is the core idea we're gonna unpack. That feeling of being stretched thin, it's not because you bought too much coffee. It's because the fundamental math of survival has been tilted, and the numbers are there to prove it.
All right, so if it's a setup, what is the setup exactly? That's the big question, right? We're going to answer that by digging into the key forces behind this crisis, starting with the most basic one. So the first big piece of this puzzle is something the source calls the repricing of existence. And yeah, it gets right to the heart of why it feels like everything, and I mean everything, costs so much more than it used to.
Look, the story here is pretty simple, but it's incredibly powerful. The cost of the absolute essentials, we're talking shelter, food, getting to work, it has sprinted ahead. Meanwhile, your paycheck, it's been jogging in place. That growing gap between the two, that's where all the stress is coming from. And this really captures the shift in what it even means to be middle class. For our parents' generation, it often meant having a buffer, a little breathing room. One income could actually support a family. But the reality for so many now, there's just no slack. Side hustles aren't about getting ahead anymore. They're about just treading water.
Okay, next up, we need to talk about housing. Because according to the source material we're looking at, this isn't just another bill. No, this is the problem, the biggest single driver of this entire crisis. The source has this great term for it, the foundational multiplier. What does that even mean? Well, think of it this way. When your rent or your mortgage payment goes up, it acts like a giant weight pushing down on everything else in your budget. Your money for groceries, for gas, for an emergency, it all gets smaller because housing always eats first. And this isn't just a feeling, right? The numbers back it up. This chart, it's based on official government data, and it shows you just how huge shelter costs are in the average person's budget. It's not just a slice of the pie. For a whole lot of people, it is the pie. And this is so important to understand. This isn't just about making a better budget. This is about a power imbalance. As a tenant, what are your real options? Moving is a nightmare, it's expensive, it's disruptive. But landlords, especially when there aren't enough places to live, they have a massive advantage. It's less of a negotiation and more of a take it or leave it situation. So that brings us to the other side of this whole mess. If costs are going through the roof, what about our paychecks? Well, let's just say our income has completely lost the race. Okay, so this chart shows something called the illusion of a raise, and it feels so real. You see that bigger number on your paycheck, right? That's your nominal wage. But what really matters is what that money can actually buy. That's your real wage after inflation. And as you can see, for so many of us, that real buying power has been stuck in neutral or even gone backwards.
And it really is like death by 1,000 cuts. It's never just one thing, is it? It's your rent going up and your car insurance and the price of groceries and your student loans kicking back in. Each one feels like a small hit, but when you add them all up, they completely bleed that raise dry before you even get a chance to use it.
This quote from the source just hits the nail on the head. When housing eats the raise wasn't a raise, it was a transfer payment to a landlord. I mean, think about that. If your pay goes up by 3%, but your rent goes up by 10, you didn't really get a raise. You just became a middleman for your landlord's profit. So, the big question is, how did we even get here? Was this just some big economic accident? Well, the source material argues pretty powerfully that no, this was not an accident. This was the predictable result of very specific choices made over decades. So let's quickly break down the three big policy moves that got us into this mess. First, you've got zoning laws that made it super hard to build new housing. That created a shortage, which, basic economics, prices shot up. Second, the tax system and subsidies were basically set up to reward people who already owned assets. And third, over a long period of time, the power of workers to negotiate for better pay was chipped away piece by piece. And really, it all boils down to this. For decades, the main goal wasn't making sure everyone could find an affordable place to live. The goal was to make sure that the value of homes that people already owned kept going up. Now, that's great if you're a homeowner, but it's a brutal setup for everyone else. So at the end of the day, here's the bottom line. our economy was optimized for asset growth, not for the survival of people living paycheck to paycheck. It was fine-tuned to make things like stocks and real estate more valuable, and we are all living with the consequences of that choice right now. All right, so this brings us to our final and maybe most important section. It's all about reframing the problem. It's about shifting the narrative away from individual blame and toward understanding the real structural forces that are at play. If there is one thing, just one sentence, you take away from all this, let it be this one. The cost floor, the bare minimum to exist, rose faster than the income floor, and at the exact same time, housing stopped being treated like a basic need and started being treated like an investment engine for owners. That's it. That's the whole crisis in a nutshell. And this has a real human cost. The source calls it a stress injury, and that's exactly what it is. That constant low-level anxiety, the exhaustion from having to make impossible financial trade-offs every single day, delaying huge life moments, that is not a personal failing. It is a predictable psychological response to an impossible economic situation. Which leaves us with this final, really powerful question. A system this out of balance, well, it can't last forever, right? Something has to give. So the question is, what breaks first? The system that created this crisis or the millions of people trying to survive within it? We're all watching to see which one it's going to be.